Good evening. Hello and welcome to State of Play on Mint Press News, a bi-weekly editorial geopolitical show where tonight we'll be breaking down the true purpose behind Netanyahu's speech in Congress yesterday, hint, Iran, and talking about the protests surrounding it in Washington, D.C. We also might be talking about potential hostile infiltration within the protest. For example, no one knew who the two white guys who burned the U.S. flag were, and the guy who spray painted Hamas is coming on the Christopher Columbus Memorial. Columbus was a genocidal tyrant in his own right, but yeah, we don't know who that guy was. No one on the ground did that I talked to. So we'll get into that if we have time at the end. But first, while everyone is filtering into the live, I would just like to highlight 5 lies that Netanyahu made in his speech, as pointed out by my colleagues at Mint Press News. First one, the Israeli Prime Minister made up a news story about 2 babies killed in an attic on October 7th, which is impossible according to Israeli police records and public data collected from that day. Second one was he said there was one of the lowest ratios of combatants to non-combatants in history. It's just like, okay, that's not even worth discussing since they dropped 2,000-pound bombs on tenement buildings. So they don't even know for sure who or what they're hitting, and a bunch of other reasons about like why that's absurd. 3, civilian deaths in Rafah are practically none. He made that assertion in the speech. If we collate all the geotagged video footage on social media, we know that's absurd. So more, and then fourth lie, I mean, there's like a dozen, but more about Hamas stealing aid. And, he can't really make that claim without acknowledging the settlers actually blocking aid. So there's that. Fifth lie was that American protesters received funds from Iran. If so, I don't know. I'm still waiting from that paycheck from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. It hasn't cleared yet at all. So don't know about the funding. Also, there's literally zero evidence for any of this. So, but like paid actors at the protest was a big narrative. And speaking of them, let's address who was actually in Congress during his speech, in which he received 58 standing ovations in 60 minutes. So I'm going to play this sped up video real quick and drive this dog and pony show home. And just say, I was kind of disappointed. They had 60 minutes, right, to do 60 standing ovations, but I guess they ran out of gas and didn't want to achieve numerical harmony. So they didn't do the last 2 standing ovations, which was very disappointing. It's almost like they can't even do one thing right. All right. Anyways, here is a sped up of all the standing ovations just to drive this all home while everyone's getting into the live. So, okay. Now, as this is happening, a fun fact is, according to Axios, around half of House and Senate Democrats skipped Netanyahu's address to a joint session of Congress on Wednesday. So by the numbers, Wednesday's boycott was significantly larger than the 58 Democrats who skipped Netanyahu's 2015 speech to Congress. And that speech was controversial because it was seen as a snub of then President Barack Obama and gave Netanyahu a platform to castigate the president over the Iran nuclear deal, which, Obama was championing. Again, Netanyahu and Iran is a main point in tonight's episode. So every time he comes to Congress, it's always about Iran, and this is no different. But relations between Netanyahu and the Democrats have become even more strained during the Israel-Hamas war. That's what we're calling it, with many pro-Israel Democrats growing increasingly critical of the humanitarian costs of the conflict. Wow. See, we're already at 25 standing ovations. That's rough. All right. So Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said this about Netanyahu's speech. Quote, Netanyahu has lost so many people that he is addressing just a fraction of Congress. When this happens, they fill the seats with non-members, like what they do at award ceremonies, in order to project the appearance of full attendance and support. So if we are speaking of paid fillers at the protest, I just have to ask, who exactly are filling 100 plus empty seats at this joint session of Congress? Because as you can see, That's a full crowd. Just wanted to put that out there. Who could it possibly be? And oh boy, is this just embarrassing. Standing up 58 times for a foreign leader as an elected official. Well, before we get into the protests and the actual speech, it is time for the plug. So Mint Press is an independent newsroom. It doesn't have any corporate sponsors. Mint Press has been banned from PayPal. Fundraisers have been taken down by GoFundMe and demonetized on YouTube. If you'd like to support this brand of independent journalism, consider dropping your Economist subscription and slanging $5 a month this way. It does go a long way to support independent watchdog journalism. If not, I get it. We're, after all, just getting nickeled and dimed by the modern world. So we're just glad in the end that you're here. So I'm kind of looking a little lobstery tonight. Myself and some others at the protest got pepper sprayed a number of times. So I can personally attest that, yes, the news articles were true. They were deploying pepper spray because the cops were very overwhelmed by the number of non-Iran funded protesters. And since we are already demonetized, here's my on-the-ground testimony from yesterday. Cover your ears, kids, because things were getting like kind of heated.
Time getting fucking pepper sprayed today. These cops aren't fucking around. Woo! Oh. All right. We're just trying to de-arrest motherfuckers. Yeah, they brought someone back? Oh, shit. Oh, it's the park police. The park police straight up murder people.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of ironic that the park police in Washington, D.C. are like the most violent and notorious for straight up executing folks. That's just a little irony. The park police are the goon squad of D.C. Bring goggles. You know, I did have aviators, and the aviators helped keep most of the bad stuff out. But yes, goggles would be preferable. All the medics did run out of saline and neutralizing solution and milk of magnesia because just so many people were pepper sprayed. So yeah, that's a good thing to know going forward. Now we will get into the protests, but first, the thing that caused it, the speech. And here are some of my opening thoughts. And I'm just going to play the whole C-SPAN B-roll while we get into this. Netanyahu's speech to full Congress. A lot of people have made connections between, you know, this and the Führer speaking to the Reich. But we're going to go ahead and skip over that imagery. So Israel is basically participating at the Olympics in Paris while Russia is banned, despite killing at least 80% fewer civilians in Ukraine than the Israeli state has killed in Gaza. Even the United States has prosecuted its own for war crimes, impunity for Israel, enforcement of international law for everybody else. So no clearer was this hypocrisy demonstrated than on Wednesday, July 24th, yesterday at time of recording, when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a man with pending ICC arrest warrants for crimes against humanity, addressed Congress in order to shore up support for his political survival, because he needs U.S. backing in order to survive politically, because there are a lot of people in Israel who do not like him, and request more weapons for his war against Hamas. You know, the main thrust of his speech was thematically organized by the supposed war between civilization, the West, and barbarism, Iran, mobilizing imperialistic language that would have made even Winston Churchill proud. So during his 60-minute speech, he received, again, 58 standing ovations. Promise it's the last time I'll mention it, but it's just mind-boggling. From Congress in a bipartisan spectacle of unquestioning adamantine support for Israel and its congressionally anointed king. Now, nothing new was said here. We got atrocity propaganda, the weaponization of the Holocaust, feigned concern for the hostages, the vague refrain that Israel is somehow America's greatest ally and the most powerful democracy in that entire region of the world. And there's this mortifying pink-washing comparison between gays for Gaza and chickens for KFC. If you look at far-right media and like posts on Twitter, it's all over that. So this was all just simply state-sponsored propaganda. But Netanyahu's true intentions bled through the usual talking points in subtext. An eventual war, for instance, between the United States and Iran. He no doubt has elaborated in private meetings on his strategy for a wider war in the Middle East, and his plans, indeed his lifelong political fever dream, should be taken seriously by every American citizen. The war in Gaza has already destroyed or disrupted millions of lives around the globe, and there are many policymakers in Washington contemplating war with Iran. What we are seeing here is an escalation of a narrative push to manufacture the required bipartisan consent for another interventionist war in the Middle East. So, for decades, the United States has hopped from unnecessary localized conflict to unnecessary localized conflict. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, Libya, Ukraine. But a confrontation with Iran would erupt across the region, potentially the globe, in a way that the U.S. military, economy, and citizenry is not equipped or prepared to deal with. So, who will pay the price if this happens? Hundreds of thousands of innocents across the sea and tens of thousands of American service members, not the policymakers or the defense contractors that profit from these wars. So when Veterans for Peace, who I was out with at the protest today, it's kind of like a global organization of anti-war military veterans that do direct action. When they say our government is, quote, run by madmen arsonists who set fires around the globe, fires that enrich their corporate masters, this is what they mean. There is no reason to believe that Iran has greater territorial aspirations or designs on the United States' sovereignty. Half a world away, right? So a war could also not be won and would be disastrous for America in myriad ways. There is an entire political bloc in Washington, though, who, knowing this, would plunge headlong into war anyway. So Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov's recent warning that any armed conflict with Iran risks drawing in other major global powers must be taken seriously. We're just threatening war right now, even though, again, we're not in a position to do so. Our armed forces are not ready to fight a major war 7,000 miles away from our territory, which is monstrously expensive for a country with like 35 trillion in debt. So the American people, and are they ready to take on that economic burden for the sake of what exactly? The nebulous and manufactured threat of foreign terrorism. They care now because of relentless fear-mongering in the media, but just wait until the Strait of Hormuz is shut down, through which 1/5 of the world's oil passes through. Like, for real, you don't like gas and grocery prices now? Well, get ready, because the political and corporate classes don't actually have to worry about rising gas and food prices. They're not a paycheck to paycheck kind of situation like you have. You know, they can afford the war. And even though a great power conflict would devastate our economy, you know, they're going to go, some of them actually want to go ahead with this anyways. So we're already feeling the grip from Houthi actions in the Red Sea. So just imagine if the entire Gulf blew up. So, and never forget too, that those that call for war always try to convince you that it will be short and decisive. And when it never is, well, too bad. We're already in too deep. Sunk cost fallacy, baby. And here's what we call it: the MIMAC now for a reason. The military, industrial, media, and academic complex for a reason. Because those same think tanks like the Rand Corporation and pundits associated with like the Atlantic Council always double down on failure and push for more conflict, more tax money, more sacrifice from American soldiers and American families in order to plunder the poorest countries on earth. Because it's not about winning. It's about making money. So our only strategic imperative is, in the end, the security and preservation of the nation itself. Y'all know I'm kind of like black flag and think nationalism is a cancer, but I'm just saying this to ask the question, how, with that in mind, is Israel actually our greatest strategic ally when it has suborned our legislature and wants a devastating war of annihilation against Iran? Because of manufactured lies, all typified by Netanyahu's speech. Now, let's get into the speech itself before we go into the protests, because he has a lot to say about us about the about the protesters, and the way he tries to manipulate and succeeds in manipulating the American legislature is very telling. So I'm going to bring up the first segment, and this was an hour-long speech. I've taken some choice clips, and I'm not going to address each point that he made during the speech because he made a lot. But what we are going to do is we're going to look at themes, because his true intention bleeds through in subtext. Real quick, Bobby, I just saw in the comments, Bobby Taylor, who brought the NYPD to DC? Well, this is nothing new. The NYPD flexes to other cities to help support with crowd control, because there's a lot of NYPD, and they're always available to tackle babies and break wheelchairs. So let me pull up this video real quick. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I apologize, guys. I'll try to make as much commentary in between this to make this viewable and watchable, but I do think it is important to actually see what he's doing, because whatever Netanyahu is going to do is what line AIPAC's going to follow, and it's what you're going to see parroted by our own elected officials. So here we go. The beginning of the speech. He paints the theme. This is old imperialist language. You're about to see what I'm talking about.
I want to thank you for giving me the profound honor of addressing this great citadel of democracy for the fourth time. We meet today at a crossroads of history. Our world is in upheaval.
He's not wrong. We're at an inflection point, right? The status quo will never return to the same. The same systems that have been that have had hegemony for the past few decades are now kind of decaying in real time, quicker than anybody thought.
In the Middle East, Iran's axis of terror confronts America, Israel, and our Arab friends.
The complicit Arab governments.
This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization.
Okay, yeah. So if you guys pull up, if you go onto Google and you pull up a poem by Kipling called "The White Man's Burden," you can see the same language used here. You know, you have children of the light and you have children of darkness. We are here to civilize the barbarians and teach them better, because they don't know any better. So they need us to civilize them. This is how he paints it. He paints it as an old kind of like 19th century struggle between the Arab, the barbaric Arab hordes and the civilized Western man. And of course, this is baked into our institutions, right? This is baked into our education system. Like, this is really easy to appeal to legislatures, those Western legislatures, using this language, because we thought that this kind of ideation didn't exist in the post-World War II era, when you had the dissolution of the British Raj, a bunch of countries having independence from British Imperium. But no, just as strong and vital today. He's actually using this language in 2024, talking to our Congress, and they're giving him standing ovations.
It's a clash between those who glorify death and those who sanctify life.
Again, just not counting that perhaps up to 186,000 civilians have been killed in the relentless bombing campaign of the Gaza Strip.
For the forces of civilization to triumph, America and Israel must stand together. Because when we stand together, something very simple happens. We win, they lose.
Okay, but then again, there is nothing specific rooted in any of this speech. So, like, feel good. This is all political theater. When have we won when it comes to intervention in the Middle East? This is just self-congratulatory crap. It's meant for the peasants.
7th, 1941, and September 11th, 2001. October 7th is a day that will forever live in infamy.
So, of course, he tries to conflate the American experience with the start of World War II and the attack on 9/11 with the Israeli experience, further painting us as natural allies, though how we're allies is never, ever specified and will never, ever be specified by these politicians.
It was the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. It began as a perfect day, not a cloud in the sky. Thousands of young Israelis were celebrating at an outdoor music festival.
Okay, so of course you'll never hear mentions of the occupation or Palestinian experience. He honestly gets into somewhat poetic language, and then he has this weird section later on where he describes in detail these two beautiful redheaded babies. There's a lot of bizarre things happening in this speech.
3,000 Hamas terrorists stormed into Israel, into the dark dungeons of Gaza.
Yep.
Israel has already brought home 135 of these hostages, including 7 who were freed in daring rescue operations.
So about the rescue operations, first of all, the vast majority of hostages were returned through diplomatic negotiations. And, you know, the 7 that were rescued, I mean, 3 were killed by IDF soldiers randomly shooting at any civilians. The hostages got away. This was early this year, and the IDF shot them. Also, he brings up October 7th. He brings up October 7th again, failing to recognize that he became prime minister again, specifically because of his hawkish defense stance, right? So he basically campaigned on keeping Israel secure, and he oversaw the worst intelligence and military failure in Israeli history. Of course, that will never be mentioned either.
One last time before I die. 2 months ago,
okay, and then
authorized a breathtaking commando rescue operation. Our special forces, including a heroic officer named Arnon.
Okay, so another technique that they use is going to be, of course, to humanize, use specific names for each of the hostages, and exploit individual deeds of valor and bravery. And, you know, of course, this is just how propaganda works. You take one specific example of something and you blow it out of all proportion. Again, this may be hard to listen to, but I thought it was kind of important just to go over how basic propaganda works, because none of this is sophisticated. None of Israel's propaganda is sophisticated, but the apparatus and the system about how it's disseminated is, because they have the Israel lobby. They have an entire infrastructure of like paying people, students, to edit Wikipedia pages, to do revisionist history. Like, it is everywhere. And all the talking points are the same, and they're all typified by what Benjamin Netanyahu says. So he begins the speech essentially by framing this as a war between good, evil, civilization, barbarism. And then what do? Because his main purpose, his political dream, has always been to instigate a war between between America and Iran. Well, we're going to start talking about. He starts getting into this.
My friends, defeating our brutal enemies requires both courage and clarity.
Brutal enemies. Okay. You know, we've all seen the bombing campaign of Gaza.
Clarity begins by knowing the difference between good and evil. Yet incredibly, many anti-Israel protesters Many choose to stand with evil. They stand with Hamas. They stand with rapists and murderers. They stand with people who came into the kibbutzim.
Okay, so now this is the made-up story he uses, and it's actually really manipulative because in a second you'll see how he's basically just making up a lie that's parallel to the story of Anne Frank that everybody in America knows because we were taught that in school.
Into a home. The parents hid the children, the two babies, in the attic, in a secret attic. They murder the families, the parents. They find the secret latch to the hidden attic, and then they murder the babies. These protesters stand with them. They should be ashamed of themselves.
I mean, again, nothing sophisticated. This is just taking one atrocity story. And in fact, this is one that never happened, just like the overwhelming majority of war crimes that happened on October 7th never actually happened. So it's kind of amazing seeing all this happen in real time because of social media and everything. The amount of consent that is being manufactured by these lies that are basically unchallenged. I just often reflect on, like, what would the Iraq war have looked like if we had the same rapid transmission of information that was outside of the mainstream media. So this story is a complete lie. It's crazy.
Israel and the terrorist thugs of Hamas. We recently learned from the National Security Director, U.S. Director of National Intelligence, that Iran is funding and promoting anti-Israel protests in America. They want to disrupt America.
Oh, he's not wrong in that the protesters want to disrupt America, specifically the American government. The one main overriding theme of what was happening, what the protest was about, was specifically very simple, very conservative position. Stop arming Israel. It wasn't even about ceasefire. This was not a ceasefire protest. This wasn't anything. This wasn't a one-state solution. This wasn't an end the occupation, end apartheid protest. It was simply stop arming Israel. Because, as you know, the ICJ has just ruled in a case that's separate from the South African genocide case, that they've just ruled that Israel is an occupation and is guilty of the crime of apartheid. So any country that is aiding and abetting in the perpetuation of the occupation and the apartheid in Palestine is complicit in the crimes and must immediately stop. So that's kind of what this protest was based off of. It was stop arming Israel, because that's just the basic international law requirement of what's going on here. So by just protesting stop arming Israel, again, very conservative position. And so when he says that the protesters want to disrupt America, they only know violence, they only want to disturb the peace. It's like, no, we're not disturbing the peace, we're disturbing the war, because the entire premise of the protest was, again, for the last time, just stop arming Israel. That's it. But one of the reasons he came to Congress was to get more support for immediately funding Israel, because this speech was about, because a couple months ago, they halted one shipment of 2,000-pound bombs, and he lost his mind over that. So one of the main purposes for him coming here was not just to continue his political goal of getting America to bomb Iran on behalf of Israel, but in order to make personal connections to a large group of congressmen so that a funding package does not get withheld ever again or slowed down. So, yeah, this is that one shipment getting stopped is one of the big reasons why he's actually here.
So these protesters burn American flags even on the 4th of July. And I wish to salute the fraternity brothers at the University of North Carolina who protected the American flag against these anti-Israel protesters.
I mean, this is straight up pandering. Maybe this isn't the best time to bring this up, but flag burning is protected under the First Amendment and is seen as free speech as long as it's not causing any property destruction. So The flag that was burned was actually not the one taken down by protesters in front of the Union Square. The flag that was burned, we think, based off everything we've seen and everyone I've talked to, 2 random white dudes showed up and burned an American flag. Not an Israeli flag. It's very suspect. But again, we're going to get into that later when we talk about protest infiltration.
Iran is funding the anti-Israel protests that are going on right now outside this building. Not that many, but they're there, and throughout the city.
Okay, I mean, there's like 20,000 people there, so he's just trying to dismiss it. There's massive disruptions. In fact, we know that the speech had to be pushed back, and that congressman couldn't even get to Capitol Hill because we had set up little pods or cells to block typical intersections. So I was with a bunch of vets from About Face. We started out by blocking one intersection on 4th and Independence Street, and the cops came up to us and were just like, "Hey, there's a motorcade coming through. Like, do you guys want to get arrested?" And then we're just like, "We're not moving." It's like, and then the cops saw all the combat fatigues. It's just like, dude, how many of you guys want to get arrested? How many of you don't want to get arrested? And instead of doing that, they just rerouted the motorcades. We don't know if we delayed Netanyahu specifically or a bunch of congressmen, but there were disruptions. We achieved that objective, and then we moved back to the main protest. That was the march later on.
Well, I have a message for these protesters.
Okay, what's the message?
From the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes,
Pink washing,
and murder women for not covering their hair.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you just murder Palestinian women for, that are in hijabs too? So I've seen how many sniper videos of just unarmed women in hijabs just getting shot in Gaza and West Bank for no reason. So let's talk about human rights violations.
Are praising, promoting, and funding you. You have officially become Iran's useful idiots.
Again, still waiting for that paycheck to clear. So again, yeah, I know I'm seeing people in the comments being like, I can't listen to this. Well, I can appreciate that. But then again, context does matter. And I don't know. I think it's important for posterity. Then again, I am used to from I don't know. I had an informal intel background in the military, so I had to watch all the beheading videos and stuff, and all the ISIS proclamations and stuff like that. And I guess I just kind of got used to watching opposition stuff. It sucks, but I mean, I do think it's a skill that people should try to develop, man. How many babies has he killed? We don't have numbers anymore because the Gaza health ministry no longer is able to identify or keep track of anything. So the casualty figure is cut off at 40,000 because they have massive logistical problems in identifying bodies and who's killed. And that's just a fraction of the people who's killed. And the Gaza health ministry, which is very well trusted and is cited by the White House and 10 Downing Street in England, despite the media narrative, they're no longer able to give accurate figures. So they've kind of stopped giving figures. And then finally, where we really drive everything home, where he really gets in everything he wants to get in, is we won't listen to much more, I promise.
Fast-tracking U.S. military aid can dramatically expedite an end to the war in Gaza and help prevent a broader war in the Middle East. In World War II.
Again, always coming back to World War II. This is so any apologist argument that you ever encounter will cite World War II, because it's something that we have collectively told ourselves was America's shining moment. We were fighting fascism. And, we actually use the fight against fascism to justify becoming more and more fascist. You don't bomb refugee camps? Well, look at all the refugee camps the Canadians bombed, around Dresden. And it's okay, you're citing the most violent military the most violent war in human history, after which all of these institutions like the Geneva Convention, the ICC, the ICJ were created so that doesn't happen again. That's the great irony that's happening here. They're using World War II to justify a warfare that was so brutal that we had to create all these international institutions with the hope that it would never happen again. I mean, obviously controlling and projecting Western domination and anti-Soviet domination was also a big part of that, but you can't ignore the founding of that.
As Britain fought on the front lines of civilization,
again, civilization, got to bring up civilization when we're fighting barbarians.
Winston Churchill appealed to Americans with these famous words: "Give us the tools and we'll finish the job."
Of course, we know what job he's actually trying to finish.
End its rule in Gaza and bring all our hostages home.
He then gives a undetailed plan for the day after Gaza. You will never hear anything concrete from any of our politicians or anything from Israeli MPs beyond bring the hostages home. Hamas can't rule after Gaza. There's some vague idea of an Arab coalition right now that will, take charge. But then he says specifically in this speech that they, quote, do not want to occupy Gaza, but security forces must be in Gaza. So even after a ceasefire, it's clear that he still intends to have military forces in Gaza, which is a red line for Hamas. So right now, based off what is said in this speech, ceasefire deal is like not going to be achieved anytime soon.
Vision for that day is of a demilitarized and de-radicalized Gaza.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we could also like de-radicalize Israel as well. And finally, just to drive home the Iran point,
I'm confident that our two nations will vanquish the tyrants and terrorists who threaten us both. As Israel's Prime Minister, I promise you this: no matter how long it takes, no matter how difficult the road ahead, Israel will not relent, Israel will not bend. We will defend our land, we will defend our people, we will fight until we achieve victory. Victory over liberty, rather victory of...
See, that is why I have subjected y'all to this much Benjamin Netanyahu. That was the Freudian slip of this entire speech. So he said, we will not stop until we achieve victory over liberty. And then it was like, no, rather victory over those who don't like liberty. So yeah, LGBTQ chickens for liberty. So yeah.
Liberty over tyranny, victory of life over death, victory of good over evil. That's our solemn commitment.
And in the end, it's all about Iran, man. So another thing to keep in mind, hey, Jim, can you remove this? I don't know. I can't find it right now. Another salient point is, well, what do you actually do with this speech? It's not, there's nothing concrete or actionable in any of this. It was nothing we've seen before. It was atrocity propaganda. It was the weaponization of the weaponizing of the Holocaust, bring the hostages home, a nebulous day after plan for Gaza. Apparently I'm an Iranian agent. And that's it. That's really it. So I think when it actually comes to the protest, now, what did it look like? Let's transition into what actually happened. There were some pretty unfortunate optics, and it's the general consensus of everybody who was on the ground and all the people who were actually keeping tabs on the situation that these were likely infiltrators. We will be following up on this, but like literally nobody knew who these guys were. So real quick. So a couple things happened. Palestinian flags were raised and replaced the American flags. And then Benjamin Netanyahu was burned in effigy. One of the guys who took some people entered the congressional chamber and were arrested. I wasn't there for that. But yeah, there was definitely some burning going on. I personally didn't see the American flag getting burned. We were trying to de-arrest some people, and that didn't work out because they deployed a lot of pepper spray. So more so than even the UT protests, which I thought were, had a lot of that. So now I just kind of wanted to make an extended Q&A for this, just as an update. Also, I'm kind of like out of it because I'm like somewhat dehydrated, so I'm just kind of like trying not to phone it in, but I would like to answer any and all of your questions. So first of all, he also in the speech addressed former President Trump, which he did another Freudian slip. He called him President Trump. And he says, "Oh, what a great friend of Israel, President Trump is," and he's going to visit Trump at Mar-a-Lago either today. It was either supposed to be today or it's tomorrow. So he's basically courting every possible support for his continued political survival. So he wants to court like good relationships with Trump. He has a meeting with Kamala Harris tomorrow, I believe, and he addressed Congress directly. He's trying to, people think people are going to overthrow Netanyahu. It's like, not yet. He is a political animal and a survivalist. He has been prime minister on and off. He's been in the game since before I was born. Betting against him probably isn't the best policy if you want to keep your money. So he's going to be around. I don't see him being supplanted just yet. So, I think Christine on Twitter says, because it would admit that our supporting of it was a mistake and they can't seem to do that. No, it's what I said in the monologue. A lot of people like to have the sunk cost fallacy. We've put this much time and resources into something that's failure, and they end up doubling down on failure. So we can't be seen to have lost the Ukrainian proxy war. So we're just going to keep funding it, even if it costs every last drop of Ukrainian blood. And even if the VA budget, the Veteran Affairs budget, is $15 billion short right now. So, as a vet, who kind of like relies on my healthcare from the VA, I'm like, oh, awesome. We're 15 billion short for the VA healthcare system. So glad we keep sending money to Israel and Ukraine. That's like not even a fraction of one of these aid packages that we've sent for our foreign wars. So that's only going to expand the recruiting crisis as well. So, okay. I think we're going to transition to just the Q&A and do an extended Q&A now. All right. Gucci Maine. What do I say to people who say, so do you support Hamas? Serious question. I don't like Israel, and this is a bag I can't get out of in conversations. No. What I do is like, look, we could say that this is a complicated situation or question, but international law is very clear on this. If we pretend to care about international law, Palestinians do have a right to armed resistance against an illegal occupation that has existed way before Hamas came into existence. So Hamas isn't the only armed group, and it's not my opinion. It is the opinion of the highest court on earth that Palestinians have a right to armed resistance. Now, if that is Hamas, well, that is Hamas, and we could argue about that, but I always bring it back to international law. And if they say, well, what about October 7th? It's like, okay, well, you're kind of coming into this mid-season. If I was just watching Game of Thrones and I saw like season 3 Joffrey for like one scene, I'd be like, oh, that guy wasn't that bad. But like I hadn't seen everything else that came before. You can't just start mid-season. So this is not something people are going to want to hear, and they're going to try to put you in the pro-terrorist box, like, oh, you love Iran, because these narratives have taken generations to construct and to weasel into our consciousness, our sociocultural consciousness. So they're not going to be dislodged all in one day. So I don't even say like I don't support or condemn it. I say there's international law. This is what it says. That's what I'm going off of. Now, if you don't like international law, fine, but that's a separate conversation. So that's kind of where I take it. But you guys do what you want, take what you like, discard what you don't. So how long before an American Revolution? It's going to be a minute. People are still really comfortable, and this is what I try to explain to people who believe that like all Muslims are prone to terrorism and stuff. It's like, no, it's like we're invading their countries and things like that and stuff like that. And you know what it takes to drive someone to the point where they're like, screw my future, screw any form of like dreams that I had. I'm going to barely eat any food, barely sleep, and then probably die violently in a hole. Yay, sign me up. Being an insurgent and living that life, it's a bad life. People only elect it because they feel like they have no other choice at like self-determination or freedom. So, but because there's been such a massive campaign to dehumanize people in the global South and outside of the traditional West for centuries, that people just accept, oh, they're fundamentally different human beings than I am. So I'll just take it at face value that they don't mind living and fighting and dying in a hole for nothing. So it's a constructed narrative. It's completely detached from any sort of humanization. And Edward Said wrote about this extensively in Orientalism. I suggest you guys read that book. It's dense. It's an academic text. But anyways, to circle back to your original question, how long before an American Revolution? Well, I brought that up because Americans are still way too comfortable to die for anything yet, or most of them. So it's just got to get worse first. So I'm an accelerationist. Trump's going to make things, I think, a lot worse. And then we'll reevaluate in 5 years, but it's still going to be a minute. Israel's economy is taking. How long will it take to collapse? Well, I'm not an economist, but I will say this. They cannot sustain the war without U.S. support. And it is tanking. They are running low on munitions, weapons. They're running low on manpower. That's one of the reasons that Netanyahu came as well, to shore up support for more aid packages. It scared them. It scared the Knesset. It scared the power brokers and the Likud party when even Biden's just like, we're not stopping this shipment. We're putting a pause on it for like a week. And they freaked out because without U.S. aid, it just goes to show you, without U.S. aid, they know that they're done. They're tanked. So their economy is tanking, which is why they're so nervous about us backing them up unconditionally, no matter what. It just goes to indicate that it's not a healthy dynamic, and they're not in a healthy spot. In terms of time, though, I'm not sure. I've heard like 5 years, 10 years, depending on what analyst you listen to. So how do we stop these psychopaths? These things take time. Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Vietnam War took 10 years of direct action, activism, and counter funding and counter lobbying to end. Things are happening faster now, but like years. And the system is so irreparably broken that, are you going to stop them while the system still exists? That's a question for another time, though. Sorry. Okay, Greg, did you see Cop Mamala's statement? Hey, Jim, could you pull up a present on Twitter, Kamala Harris's statement about the protests? I'll move on for the question until we pull that up. Yeah, you just go to X and pull up her most recent statement about the protests. It's in a letterhead. Okay. Greg, am I wrong in thinking the gathering? Okay, this is from Twitter. Am I wrong in thinking the gathering at Union Square was unplanned? I was at the protest yesterday. My sense was the march gathering around Union Square was because the march is being turned back. I'm not sure if it was planned, but it seemed like the march had come to a conclusion, and that's where it ended up. I wasn't an organizer. I was just there with some veterans. I wasn't plugged into anything really, and I was just kind of documenting stuff. I just it was really hot and people were starting to fall out. So I think everybody just stopped there because it was a good place to congregate. Whether it was planned or not, I am not sure at all. So let me see. Okay, here we go. Yeah, we could present the Mamala stuff right now. So I think you've got it. You can put it up on stage. Okay, fine. I'll do it. Oh, here we go. Okay, cool. So, statement from the Vice President Kamala Harris. So, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Twitter exploded when she didn't, and of course, sorry, X exploded because it's full of a bunch of right wing people, basically highlighting the fact that she didn't talk to Netanyahu, she doesn't support Israel, she's anti-Semitic, whatever. So for immediate release, it says, yesterday at Union Square Station, Washington, D.C., we saw despicable acts of unpatriotic protesters and dangerous hate-fueled rhetoric. Again, the hate-fueled rhetoric was overridingly stop arming Israel. And of course, she doesn't contextualize why the protests were happening. This is manipulative press statement at its finest. It says basically it just implies that radicals were coming out of nowhere without context just to be radical. So I condemn any individuals associated with the brutal terrorist organization Hamas, which has vowed to annihilate the state of Israel and kill Jews. First of all, they've changed their charter completely. Organizations are allowed to change. And if you want to throw stones about annihilation, if you read the Likud charter, which hasn't been updated, it's straight up genocidal and all about ethnic cleansing. So yeah, okay, cool. Thanks, top cop Mamala. So pro-Hamas graffiti and rhetoric is abhorrent and we must not tolerate it in our nation. I condemn the burning of the American flag. The flag is a symbol of our highest ideals, like funding far right, Contras to overthrow democratically elected leaders and stuff. It's the promise of America. It should never be desecrated in that way. Again, if you grew up like in the underground music scene, you've been seeing American flags get burned, forever. This was like pre-Hamas stuff. It was even pre like global war on terror. Sometimes people are just pissed off about U.S. foreign policy. Again, I'm not endorsing it. I think it's bad optics, but it is protected speech. So I love how they don't mention that at all. It's like literally your First Amendment right to burn your own flag. It doesn't matter what the flag is. If it's yours, you can burn it. So I support the right to peacefully protest. Do you though? But let's be clear, anti-Semitism, which, Jewish Voice for Peace was there, and a lot of anti-Zionist Jewish people were there. Hate and violence of any kind have no place in our nation. I mean, it just kind of shows that she will not change her stance, and her stance will be completely indistinguishable from that of Biden's. So, yeah, if you think that politicians are going to change the overriding dynamics that enforce this system, you're crazy. So, let's see, what else do we got? Will Russia help Iran in case it's attacked by the Israel and the U.S.? Well, I brought this up. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov said, cautioned against attacking Iran because it would bring in global powers into a conflict. So he's soft threatening that could happen. Just going to point that out. But I still don't think the Iran thing is going to pop off anytime soon because we're just not in a position to do it. But then again, that won't stop people from trying, which is why Netanyahu is there. So I'm afraid of my VA in DC. Honestly, I think they'll pass a stopgap measure to fund the VA, so no one's going to lose any of their funding yet, at least not this year. So, okay, here's a good one. Wait 1 second, let me see. Okay, I have a question. What's your takeaway from the protests in DC? What are some things we could do better next time? Well, first of all, I am not an organizer. I try to educate people about issues and then spread the word. That's not my role. Because it's not my expertise when it comes to protests and organizing protests and stuff. I do think it would be helpful though if people in the protests were more willing to lock shields with cops and to try and help kettle police into de-arresting people, because there are a lot of people trying to do that, and we don't no one needs you to like start like grabbing people out of police lines, but just being there and pushing up against it, the more people there are, the safer everybody is. So like at the DC protests or like DRS tried to happen and people just like recording it like 10 meters back with their cell phones. It's just like either get stuck in or get out of the way. Like you're actually making everybody unsafe right now. So more unsafe. So that was one of the things that was like frustrating me personally. But then again, I'm not the right person for this question. I'm not an organizer. I'm not the most experienced person when it comes to protests. So there's that. Also, no, I thought it was pretty good. One thing is like we don't know who these people were that did stupid things. Like some people are going to be like, "Oh, you're a federal agent. You know, you're an apologist for saying like don't burn the American flag." It's like, dude, I just told you. I'm Black Flag. I think nationalism is a cancer, but there is an information war that we're trying to win. So, if someone's doing that, the fact that like they weren't challenged at all, be like, hey dude, why isn't that like an Israeli flag? Like what, like who are you? Like where are you coming from? It's just, there's just like no questioning that at all. I don't know. I do think that in a group of 20,000 people, there are going to be people who just do whatever. So there's that, but like we have to bear in mind that this plays into the government's hands when this thing's happened. Like it directly benefits them. So that's why we're saying like, was this infiltration? Because it hurts the cause. And the fact that nobody was challenging these people was a problem. And now you may disagree with me on that, but just as someone with a background in military information operations, that was a whiff. That was a doozy that these guys weren't challenged at all. And nobody knew who they were. And like the two guys who burned the flag were like white, just saying, kind of sketchy. So, let's see. Let me think. What else we got? Yeah. So anyways, I just wanted to get back to Kamala Harris's statement. Of course, like none of these people are going to like civil disobedience at all. Again, we're not threatening the peace. We're threatening the war. And if you look at how Democrats and Republicans vote, oh, they're always pro-war. They're pro-military industrial complex, and they're overwhelmingly pro-Israel, who, again, as we saw today, looking at the footage, wants the United States to bomb Iran on behalf of their nation in the Eastern Mediterranean. So, yeah, I think that's the big takeaway is just understanding why Netanyahu was here. He was there, again, just in conclusion, he was there to shore up political support for his continued survival, because, again, he's not very popular in Israel, so he needs foreign backing. He was there because he addresses Congress every time he wants an escalation against Iran, because Iran's an important target for Israel. It's the most powerful country in that part of the world that can challenge Israel, because it's not controlled by debt colonialism like Egypt is by the IMF and the World Bank, and it's not beholden to the United States like the Hashemite monarchy in Jordan, which was, you could argue, installed by the CIA. You know, it doesn't have all these levers of control that the West generally has over other Arab leaders in the region, and we've tried to sink Iran. I'm going to keep this going for a couple more minutes. We tried to sink Iran with sanctions. Didn't work. You can argue that they've become stronger, and they are the actor in the region that the United States and Israel cannot control, and therefore it's a direct threat to Israeli impunity in the region. And you know, we all know that Israel doesn't want any rules. It wants to be the first among all nations, and doesn't want to do like international law or negotiate. It only wants to exercise the language of force, and Iran is the biggest threat to that. So, yeah, that's why he was there. He was also there because their economy is tanking, sinking, and the even halting of arms for like a week was deeply, deeply disturbing and distressing to them. And yeah, him coming there to talking shouldn't be this like, oh, so depressing. No, I mean, they're there because they're worried. he's worried. That's why he came there. I mean, it's a political stunt. And if you really look into it, it's because the desperation is mounting. So that's my take on that. It's not all doom and gloom. So, Greg, okay, here we go. I think someone said, here we go. Can you talk about why we aren't all in the streets? American rugged individualism and survival are big ones. Yeah, and then people are not going to care until their own personal freedoms are affected. So yes, there's a bunch of people in coffee shops being like, oh, the killing in Gaza is so sad. Like, why are we funding the war in Ukraine? Like, why aren't we ever looking for diplomatic solutions? But they're never going to start taking to the streets until they realize those same systems that are like bombing the poorest countries on earth are also depriving them of their own rights. And they're not going to wake up to that until their own rights start to get taken away, which is why a potential Trump presidency is going to accelerate activism and people taking to the streets faster. He's an accelerant. He's like lighter fluid. So people are just too comfortable. People don't understand, and they don't want to understand what's actually at stake here and how scary things truly are. So I think Jazia's chill zone. People are obsessed with Kamala because in their mind it stops Project 2025, which affected them. Now they have a solution for that now. If you think bodily autonomy isn't going to continue to get stripped away, and if you think the police state isn't going to get worse under a Democratic president, I don't want whatever you're smoking because it's making you crazy. So Project 25 is going to happen no matter what. We're kind of sliding into a fascist security state as it is. So, Trump will make it happen faster. It'll happen slower, maybe under top cop Kamala, but this is happening, folks, and get ready. So encourage activism and education amongst your community. Netanyahu is concerned. That's why he's having to play this political game. And we'll just see what happens this weekend because there's always something crazy that happened this weekend. So sorry. I'm sorry if this was a bit scattered. Again, still very dehydrated. So hot yesterday. So I hope this was understandable and informative and enjoyable. We'll be back Monday with a news roll up and probably a more analytical perspective than what we did today. So thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Y'all have a good night. Cheers, y'all.